So it's time for bigger on the inside, compassionate respect for the vastness of human capacity. Please welcome Alastair Somerville, sensory design consultant, Acuity Design.
Thank you. Perfect. Right. Buongiorno. That is my complete Italian. So let us start. Thank you for the invite to come here. Given we're going to be talking about users and usability, I thought I'd best have some users. I did think about having some users on stage, but I discovered I have some. We will be talking about Josh, who is over here, who is very big, and also Jo, who's over here. She's slightly smaller. And we'll talk about them, but first of all, talk about me. What I do is slightly strange. So I drift around the area of human perception and human senses. So the stuff I design drifts between digital and physical. So on the screen, you can see there's a death mask which we made by laser scanning and then three-dimensional printing, which is for a museum, and which we used in a project talking about phrenology, the old science of believing that the bumps on the head would give you the idea of criminality. It's, of course, rubbish. One of the odd things is actually that person there who was executed in the 19th century did have a disability. You can tell from the skull shape. And so it would have even shown even less than they thought. On the other side is the project works which I do lately, which is mostly to do with exclusion and inclusion. So on the top was some work we've been doing in Leeds in developing smart city technology, which is about including people, older people. The majority of the people we were dealing with were 85 and above, who are stuck, who are lonely, who are disconnected from society. So how do we actually create usable social technology for people who are excluded due to age, due to their poverty, due to their physical impairments? And then on the lower part, that's Wayfinder, which is actually a side project from the Us2 agency, which is a guiding system for blind people, which is for use in metro systems where GPS and where other systems don't work. So it's been tested in the London Underground and in Australia, and it's about to be tested in Barcelona. So it's a very good system. Google are now funding it quite heavily. So on both those projects, I work on the usability in terms of how do we understand whether a person can use a technology, and also on perception and how do people understand information. So that's where I come from. However, this talk is not about that at all. What I'm interested in today is that we have a habit of designing for Josh, and we have a habit of ignoring Jo. And it's because of biases in the type of research and the type of work we work with, which has created these biases that have embedded ideas of what it is to be human, ideas of what it is which limit the idea of what it is to be human. And yet we need to understand, and there is a lot of good research coming out now, about how extraordinary the capacities of human beings are and how much we should design for that. So, by the end of this talk, in about 30 minutes or so, Josh, the giraffe, will be smaller, sort of. Jo will be bigger. The ideas that we are using for designing for Josh will become obviously problematic. And why there are these problems and why there are these biases which are creating an idea of user experience, which means we design for a very limited idea of what it is to be human, and which designs usability for a very small version of human, is to some extent buried in the past. And it's buried in the fact that it's quite a young industry. So user experience, usability, all of these things, it is a young industry. And when people came into it, when it was invented, there was this idea that you needed to be able to understand how to manage for the complexity, for the vastness of human beings. So people went and borrowed research and ideas from other places, because otherwise you would end up having no idea what to do. So people borrowed from different places. Fundamentally, they went and borrowed from psychology. Psychology has ideas of trying to clarify certain types of being. It clarifies certain ideas of what human beings do. And it gives you certain ways of thinking about it, which is fine. And then it has to be said, psychology has also borrowed quite a lot from economics, which is a much older science in that sense, where economics, years before, in terms of Adam Smith and in terms of Ricardo, had ideas of rational man, very specifically rational, almost always man, as being the thing, the model of what it is to be human. And they used it because that gave them clarity when they were dealing with complex, messy realities. And that has issues. And finally, the one which seems to have affected UX and usability most is social psychology, which is basically Stanford post-war, where you see a lot of the post-war concerns about applying psychology in human terms, and also, if you look at a lot of the early research, a very, very large concern with what happened in World War II in terms of compliance, in terms of the ways in which people behaved during the war. So you see the Milgram experiments, the prisoner experiments, all of these things, and then game theory. And all of these things come back to the idea that to be human is to be rational, to be an individual, and to be a man, basically, almost all the time. And these core biases, these things, come through the whole history of what we do. And it's a problem, because it blinds us to the ideas of what it is to be actually human. So, let us talk of Joe instead. Joe is a human being who has evolved over 40,000 years. And human evolution is interesting in terms of what it doesn't do. So, when you look at human beings, one of the things which people don't understand about the what or how we evolved is we did not evolve like the shark over there, which is a very good killing machine. But it is a killing machine which has existed in the same form for millions of years. Adaptation is the fundamental thing that human beings have. It's our basic skill. So that, for example, when human beings come to the sea, when we come to the shoreline, we do not spend several thousand years evolving fins and gills. We get together with a few other human beings and we think about it and we build a boat. We adapt. We use cognition. That's the fundamental thing which human beings evolved. We have evolved brains which adapt, which change, which are capable of doing the most extraordinary things. And that's the thing which we have. And the other side of that is we have sociability. We're not individuals. Being human is not being an individual. It is about being a person in a group with others. And sociability, these ideas of sociability, the idea of Josh alone, the individual using the system, testing the system, is rubbish. It's about using systems. Usability is amongst people. It's about sharing, because that's what it is to be human, and usability depends upon it. So, Josh is an individual, rational man, and that's slightly strange. Joe is a sociable human being with others, and that's normal. Going back to Josh and the world of sciences that we keep using, one of the things which also comes out in a lot of the stuff is the obsession with talking about impairments, which I know, talking about usability, and I work in accessibility, we obsess about talking about impairments. But the thing which is always unhelpful is the more you talk about the impairment, and this comes up in inclusive design, the more you look and think about the impairment, the less and less you look at the human being. You obsess about the illness. You obsess about the thing that is wrong. You keep constricting the person down to a discussion of what is wrong with them. And that creates terrible biases in research, because you create these things which are based not around the person, but about the thing that is wrong about them. Model terms, we have moved on from the medical idea of disability to what's known as the social idea, but even that still has issues of what we do. So we obsess about the thing which is wrong. We make the person smaller. And then we talk about biases. And particularly nowadays, we seem to be very obsessed with discussing human biases, which is fine. However, when talking about bias, do realize there is a bias in talking about biases. This gets a bit meta. But when you talk about biases, don't we need to talk about them. I am fully aware we need to talk about biases, but don't allow to discuss biases to make the person seem stupider. A lot of the way in which we talk about biases about humans compared to the way we talk about biases in algorithms is we are forgiving of algorithms and their biases and their stupidities, while we are unforgiving of human weaknesses and biases. And that creates problems that we want to, again, constrict the idea of what it is to be human. We want to constrict down to say that humans are foolish, that they are weak, that they are incapable. They have these biases, they have these impairments. And again, we create a smaller and smaller version of what it is to be human. And again, that's not good. And finally, secondly, behaviors. Behavioural design, nudge theory, and all these things, which actually just won the Nobel Prize. I find this stuff, again, worrying. When I was at university, behavioural design, the concept of behavioural design, was known as Skinnerism and was viewed as a really, really bad thing. It was viewed as a form of control, a form of manipulation of humans that would be bad, because it mostly always was about the powerful manipulating the behavior of the unpowerful, the unprivileged. So that idea, again, rather like the biases, of really simplifying down human beings to their biases and their behaviors creates problems, because, again, you are constricting what it is to be human. You're constricting the idea. You think that people are weak. You think they are manipulatable. You can read stuff like Nir Eyal's Hooked, which is a good book, and yet it is very much about how do we understand how to manipulate human behavior. The final thing which comes out of this, and all of these things, all of these models, all of these things, they're all about people, professionals, trying to deal with the complexity of what it is to be human. So it's natural. But there is a dangerous side to what we do. There is a danger to all of this, which comes out in models. So people use behavioural design, they use bias, all of these things, to try and create clarity, to try and create frameworks, to try and create patterns of what it is to be human. And they think these things are neutral, that they think these things don't affect the users, but they do. And the problem is, when you talk about these things, when we use these things, when we use them in usability labs, when we use them in surveys and discussions, the way in which we model human beings changes the people we are working with. Models affect humans. The way in which we talk about them changes the way they behave. So there are a number of examples, but one of the ones which is important, well, which has come up of late, is there's a book called Donut Economics, which is a very good reframing of the whole of economic theory. Within that, there is a discussion of an economic theory which has just won a Nobel Prize as well, the Black-Scholes bond modelling, which is sadly something also I had to study at university, which is to do with financial models. Now, when the model was created, and it is a very clever model of how to price financial bonds, which we don't need to get into, it's good, but when it was first created, and there has now been research on the research, the model didn't work. The amount of difference between the Black-Scholes model and what actually happened was about 40%. So it was as close to just under random luck whether the model worked or not. But within 10 years, the error rate was down to 3%. The model, after 10 years of being in existence, worked. People, the traders, complied to the model. The model created the reality, and the reality changed because of the model. You see this. People comply to the models that you present of them. The idea of what it is to be human that you present to the human beings is the identity they will take. You see it in lab settings when you have this problem. Do excuse me, I have a cold. You see it in lab settings, and there is, for an industry which talks about personas a lot, one of the things that is less discussed is what's known as schema. Schema are really important. If you don't know schema, you should. Schema are temporary identities that we take on when we are in a social situation with another person, particularly with people with power or privilege or other sequences like that. People behave in the way that they expect the person they are with wants them to behave. So if you create usability work, laboratories, research, where you don't realize that your presence actually creates the identity of the person you're talking to, then you are going to get strange results. And this thing, models have power. Research is fine. Using research to be able to inform the way you think has sub-issues. But when you start to solidify stuff into models and apply those models to humans, you will find things go odd. And you won't notice because you think it's normal. And it's not normal. Meanwhile, in the other world of Joe, we live in a world where we're talking and we're researching, and this is sort of the world I live in mostly. We're mostly talking about capacities. We're talking about the fact that human beings are vastly more capable, vastly more interesting than we ever imagined previously. And we're backing it up with research. And you see it in a number of the areas of research which I come across from accessibility work, where we're trying to change the technology which people use in terms of going beyond screens. Number one, and I must apologize, I'm going to use a lot of words now which don't almost exist in English. So if they don't exist in Italian, don't worry. They don't really exist in English yet. So neuroplasticity, the ability of the mind to change its own physical self. which has come up in accessibility work several times. We have several technologies, assistive technologies, which depend upon the brain changing its own physical capacities. In America, there's a man called Daniel Kish. He lives in Boston, if memory serves. He's completely blind. He has been blind since birth. He is capable of bicycling around Boston quite happily. He is using echolocation. He clicks his tongue and listens to what's happening around him. When it's been looked at, what we found, or what was found, is when he was brain scanned, pathways, his brain has changed. His brain, instead of having a pathway which connects the ear to where oral processing, which is just behind it, he has new pathways in the brain which connect his hearing to his visual cortex at the back. Sound is processed as vision. He actually sees using sound, and his brain has changed to achieve that. You see that there's also several projects where we're using tongue-based visual systems. So camera, and then you have a small system which goes on your tongue, and you see through your tongue. It's not taste, it uses sort of vibration and electric shock, but you see through your tongue. The brain changes. It's important to say that there are errors in this system. One of the things which comes out is a lot of the change is the person must be emotionally invested in wanting the change. This isn't just mindfulness and meditation. There is actually quite large issues of how to do this, but it does happen. This is the most completely unreal word you'll see today, individualism, which is, we're trying to find a word to describe this because it's a very difficult concept of what it is to be human. So when I talked about humans not being individuals, when I talked about us being groups, we adapt, we work together, we solve problems. One of the things which is also coming out of research now is what is known in research as perispace. So we are embodied intelligences. We have our brains, we have neuronic cells all the way through our bodies. All of us is a brain. But actually we have cognition, we have intelligence that extends beyond our physical self. Human beings together actually are more intelligent, because when we're in individual space, when we're actually in space together, our cognitive capacities increase. And this is perispace, this is individual space. It depends upon positive emotion, it has to be said. But the ability of us to be able to think better, to create more, to do more, when we are together with other human beings exists. This is not untrue. This is completely real. How we design for it and can we design for it are issues. But human beings, because we are not individuals, because we are social, that is the key to us being better. That is one of the things which makes things more usable. And finally, in terms of things which are much, much, much bigger about human beings, a lot of my work this year has also been about human transcendence. The experience of the beyond, the experience of the vast, the experience of awe, mostly known for religion, not completely. Transcendent experience, transcendent human experience is now actually an area of usability research. It's in UX because the ideas of transcendence are now back into research. Transcendence and human experiences, transcendent experiences of awe, wonder, God, all of these things, they sort of disappeared from research in 1968 when the war on drugs started. So all of these things disappeared. But what's happened in the last few years is universities are now actually allowed to use LSD and psilocybin, magic mushrooms and other things in research. I have to say university sounds much more fun now. So you can take drugs. And what we're seeing is really important work about how human beings can have experiences, tiny experiences, which have massive, huge changes upon their emotional lives, upon their whole outlook on life. And it changes. We're seeing huge improvements in addiction programs. You use drugs to stop people being addicted. It seems strange, but it does work. We're seeing it in happiness research. Transcendence, the ability of being human, the ability of us to sense and to experience things vaster than ourselves, exists. It's very badly discussed in Western societies. Other societies, much better. So humans can change. Humans together are vastly more capable. And humans can experience things way, way beyond the things that algorithms and technology can even possibly imagine. Humans are big. Finally, the other problem, going back to Josh, who is trapped by his biases, trapped by his impairments, trapped by the model of what he is supposed to be, who has become smaller and much, much less human over time, is that all of the research, particularly the social psychology research, is horribly, horribly exclusive. All of the stuff which goes into these Nobel Prizes, all of this stuff which goes into nudge theory, horribly, horribly biased. Because it's weird. Weird is a really important thing, and we will be able to demonstrate the problem of bias very quickly. Weird is an idea which comes up in several books now when discussing where the errors in current usability and social psychology lies. And it's this. So, let us do this very quickly. Hands up everyone in the room who's white, or describes themselves as white. That's interesting. Okay. How many people in the room decide themselves as educated? Educated people? Anything? Degrees? Exams? Are you educated? I'm surprised by how non-educated you are. Do you live in an industrialized society? Hands up. Yes. Do you live, or are you rich? Do you think you're rich? This is actually slightly the issue. One of the things, this one's really difficult. Rich is really important because, and again coming to usability, your perception of your wealth is an issue. But particularly in accessibility, we know that at least 60 to 70% of people with disabilities are unemployed. Poverty and disability are completely linked. So when we have places where we're talking to rich people, we know we're almost certainly not talking to disabled people. Finally, do you live in a democratic society? Hands up. Do you live in a democracy? Honestly, you do. The majority of research which is done on social psychology, the majority of the social psychology research has been done on fundamentally American students. The majority of the research, and let me just check my percentages because it's ridiculous. Yes. 96% of research in social psychology is on students who are weird, white, educated, industrialized society, rich, democratic. And almost all of it's done on American students. So the majority of social psychology research has been done on roughly a population representing 12% of the world's population. So everything we talk about Josh, all of these models, about nudges, about bias, about rationality, about behavior, All of them are dependent upon a tiny, tiny number of people. So, you see, the problem with Josh is he does exist, but he's an American student in California, basically. And we're trying to model ideas of usability, and we're trying to model ideas of what it is to be human as a global idea upon him. And the problem in that sense is just Josh doesn't exist. The ideas we're using in the design processes, the ideas and the research that we're using to be able to create these frameworks, to create these models, are all biased. They may be right, but then again, people comply to the models you present, so they might not be. But Josh doesn't exist. Everything we're using, all of this stuff, doesn't work because we don't know, because we're excluding 88% of the human population from the research. We're excluding close to 100% of the population from the work that we're doing. So how do we know what's usable? So Josh is gone. Josh doesn't exist. But Joe does, and Joe is where we need to think about things, because Joe is actually the future, and she offers us the possibilities of a usable world, an inclusive world, because there is all of this stuff coming through now about thinking about humans inclusively, thinking about people without all these terrible theories. We can think about diversity. We work with diversity. So we're working with the gender diversities. We're working with the sort of racial diversities. All of these concepts of categories, some of which drift, as was said earlier. The ideas of sort of being one thing or other, the binariness is disappearing. Things mix, things change. And that's good. And it's good that we recognize that these things are changing and that there are differences. And we can work with them, and that's what we work with. We work with the fact that humans are diverse. The area which is very big for me at the moment is also within the person, within the systems of perception and memory and all of these things, is neurodiversity. The ideas that our brains are all different, because we all have different experiences, we all have different lives, we've all lived different places and done different things. But then even that's changeable. You have the ideas of designing for autistic people. You have ideas of designing for people with dementia. Ideas of that there are different ways in which people live their lives, and that those things change. Your brain changes over your life. It has to. The way in which you remember, the way in which you think changes. It always changes. So, design for neurodiversity is a very new area. We're doing a lot of work in UK in terms of both designing digital and physical environments for neurodiversity. How to create spaces and places which are inclusive to people with different perceptions. How do we design places which are open and safe and welcoming to people who are, for the most part, excluded. We have a very large project with an area with 2 million people visiting a week. And we know it's currently the number of people there who have autism or who have dementia is very low. But yet we're talking about how do we design a physical space which offers people the calm they need, which offers them the welcome they want. Neurodiversity is a huge area and will become even bigger. And finally, communities, designing for communities. If there's one thing which comes across is being human is about being in. Look for the communities that the people that you're working with live in. Bring those communities into your work. This is where participatory design and co-design works, where you are actually not bringing a single user in. You're bringing in the single user plus their family, plus their community, because then you will discover what the usability is. Then you will actually find out what's true. Communities is everything. We live in the world where we are human and we live in communities. So, what can we design for in usability? Or what should we design for? I think that we need to think about designing for the world. That too often, too much, we've designed for a tiny, tiny group of people and proved the usability of what we've created for a tiny, tiny group of people. And now we have the opportunity to do more. We have both the research and the technologies to be able to go out and actually develop new forms of technology and new forms of experience for everyone. And of course, once you accept neuroplasticity, once you accept the ideas of transcendence, then the possibilities of the future design are massive. Because the world inside of us is so vast. When you look at augmented reality and virtual reality, the possibilities there of creating whole new worlds of experience, whole universes of experiences are there. How we do it, still up in the air a bit, but we can do it and we should do it because we can design for the beyond. We can design for the fact that humans are Joe. They are vast. They have capacities, not impairments. They have almost unlimited ability to change and be more. And we need to design for those things. We need to design for Joe, but then we design for us. If we design better for Joe, you will design a better thing for yourself. You will design better things for all of us. And that's it. Thank you. There is, if you look on my Twitter stream, which is Acuity Design, there is a reading list of all the books which are part of the speech. So books on transcendence, books on economics, all of these things. There's a list of about 5 books. I would recommend reading them. Thank you.
So, big round of applause again to Alastair, and if you... It's all yours. If you have some question for him, I encourage you to do so. There's Barbara around here with the microphone. Any question? Don't be shy. They're shy. They're actually
Very
shy.
tired.
So let's give him another round of applause and thank you again.
Thank you.